Oh, my kids. Um, senior, sophomore, and eighth grade. So every other year.
Yeah.
But at least they're all on the same campus now, which is nice. Yeah.
Yes.
At one point we had 3 in 3 different schools, and that was a lot of emails, just so many emails.
All right, I'm gonna begin so we can finish quickly. So why don't we do roll call to start? Marty?
Here.
Mish?
Present here.
Nina?
Here.
Simone?
Here.
Cam?
Here.
And Janet?
Here.
Just here, and I'm here. Great, so we have a quorum. I sent around the minutes from the 30th that Marty did. I don't know if people had a chance to look at them or not. So if not, we can put them off a week to vote on. But if people did get a chance to look, we could vote on them this evening.
I had a chance to look and they look fine to me.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yep.
Same here.
Same with me.
Yeah, me too.
Terrific. So I'll take a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Great. Right. Marty?
Yes.
Mish?
Yes.
Simone?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes.
Cam?
Yes.
And Janet?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So great. So I want to briefly just mention the calendar of the orientation sessions. Barry Goldman had surgery recently, so wasn't able to attend this evening, but said he could do a session for us sometime in the near future on the capital budget. I'm hopeful that Michael and Carl and Robin will start a session on going through the budgeting process next Wednesday. So hopefully that'll be next Wednesday, and the Wednesday after. We're not going to meet the week of Thanksgiving rather, and then we'd have Barry meet with us the week after Thanksgiving. And then Dawn has said she would speak about the school committee budget and the budgeting process and some of the regulations around state aid for schools. And she'll do that early in December. So that's the next several weeks of orientation sessions. What I did want to do tonight is have Marty and Marty and me go over a kind of our experiences attending the Association of Town Finance Committee meeting last Saturday, which was at the Sharon Community Center. Marty, you want to start?
Sure. Maybe the first thing is to ask if anybody's ever been to the Sharon Community Center. It's quite an impressive building on the shores of Lake Massapog. And if you haven't been there and you're in the area, you should stop over. It's quite an impressive facility. But the meeting itself, it was the annual meeting of a group called the Association of Town Finance Committees, which in addition to the annual meeting, they have a day of sessions for attendees, and the attendees are primarily people like us, members of town finance committees and warrant committees all over the state. And there were a number of sessions. I think Woody had shared the agenda and invitation with everybody. the one session that I found to be quite helpful from my perspective was the one titled Budgeting 101. And it was led by the town administrator from the town of Holliston, who's had experience in Holliston for the past 2 or 3 years, but before that spent time in Weston and in Danvers, a smaller town and a pretty large town, maybe even a city, but Danvers, along with the assistant town administrator in Medfield. And I would describe them as being quite passionate about the topic. I had probably low expectations given the title of it. I thought it would be down in the weeds of the nuts and bolts, but instead it was really a presentation on a best practices framework that the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, which is a national group that does a lot of drafting or promulgating of the different processes and accounting standards around municipalities. And the presentation itself was really how to best organize and present municipalities' financial information in supporting the budget preparation process and transparency to all the various stakeholders, whether it be people working in the town business and operational side, as well as the citizens. And the presentation itself really focused on what the GFOA describes as the 14 minimum standards that they look for quality budget processes and documentation and actual budget documents that underlie the town hearings that many towns have in that form of government. I would describe the two presenters, I mentioned, as pretty passionate about it and made mention a few times of the competition, I guess, or the validation by the GFOA, where you can be recognized and receive an award as a town that adopts these standards, as well as the minimum standards, as well as there's some other standards that they've put out for towns to consider to even raise the bar further with respect to clarity and discipline. And in conversations over the past few days with folks on the Dover side, apparently many of these standards are being followed. They were never articulated from my perspective. I wasn't aware of them. And the expectation is that in the session that Woody just referenced, where Robin and Michael and Carl will be putting together, there will be some tying together many of these standards. So I think rather than me trying to get ahead of them, you'll see, I think, a lot of what they went through in this presentation as part of that training session. So that from that perspective, it's given, I think, me and hopefully Woody as well, a little bit of a head start in terms of identifying, recognizing, and understanding how that's all put together. So from my perspective, that was probably the highlight of the day. There were other sessions. There's one on relationships between the finance committee and the school department in one of the towns. They actually had a session on that, as well as 2 other sessions. There were concurrent sessions. You couldn't go to all of them, which I think I would make a suggestion if they ask people to fill out a survey. It would be nice to potentially extend it a bit and allow you to be able to go to the other 2 as well. So you had to make selections. But all in all, I would recommend if they do, and I guess they do it every year, that if you are available and you have the time, I think it's worth the effort to go down there, just not just for the sessions, but just the informal conversation that you're having with other towns and some of the challenges that they're having and how they deal with it. And it does seem to me, the schools, we spent some time talking about the regional schools, and I'm sure it's even at the individual town school level, there can be some issues with respect to the communication channels and the understandings or misunderstandings that take place. So one of the sessions was particularly about a a town that had some issues, but I'm not going to go into that. I think, Woody, you were somebody that I think.
I can describe that. The meeting was interesting. I think there were about 80 people there. Most towns that were represented had more than one person attend, anywhere from 1 to 6, though, from different towns. And I think there were approximately 35 to 40 different towns that were represented, most from the eastern part of the state. Obviously it was a lot more convenient if you were located in the eastern part of the state. The remainder of the program that as Marty mentioned is there was a the opening session was on the state budget and prospects for the state budget by someone from Mass Taxpayers, and it went very fast. A lot of it went over my head. His predictions about where the budget's going. He is incredibly knowledgeable, but he did at least raise a concern about, particularly about school aid and whether it would be completely funded this year. Right now, the state is revenues are falling below budget, and they're managing to kind of correct things because of the millionaire's tax, but the use of the millionaire's tax revenue is constrained, and it is not 100% clear whether or not how much revenue will end up being devoted to the to school aid. That I would say that was the most pessimistic thing that he mentioned. As Murray said, that we both attended the session on the relationship between schools and the school boards and town finance committees, suggesting that this is I would say a contentious relationship in many towns. The presentation was done by the town manager and someone who'd been a previous school board chair from Mansfield. Mansfield went through a period of incredibly rapid growth around 2010, 2011, in which the town nearly doubled in size. And in the process of the rapid growth, they had a lot of trouble maintaining services, and one of the strains was on support for the school system. So with a rapid increase in the number of kids in the school system, I think at one point in that period, Mansfield had the lowest median age of any town in the state. So their schools really swelled, and the average class size went up from 20 in mid 2000s to 30. So there's a lot of stress, a lot of back and forth, and they were not putting any money aside for capital improvement of the school systems. And the relationship between the finance committee and school board was definitely very tense. What they came up with as a way of trying to get ahead of things and to try and get everybody to work together was they created a subcommittee of the town government, in which they had 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members from the Finance Committee, and 2 members from the school board, who met on a regular basis. And the goal of those meetings was to primarily to share information, with one of the major goals being to make the school board members more aware of what the constraints on the town budget were. Prior to that, the school board pretty much came up with its own budget in isolation. Not aware of what the issues were going to be about the capital budget for the town and whether they were in danger of needing a Prop 2.5 override. And the structure was they maintained was quite effective. The communication improved. The school board and the finance members started to work together on planning for capital improvements of the schools, and things really have progressed well over the last decade plus. I would say the one minor concern, or maybe moderate concern, is that the woman who had started this group and had been at different times chair of the school committee said that she had in the last few years detected some deterioration in the relationship between the school board and the finance committee, and she interestingly attributed that to the fact that a number of the people who'd been involved in creating this structure back in around 2010 to 2012 had now started to withdraw from town government. They had served in a number of capacities. Many of them had been on multiple different committees, but they were gradually withdrawing. Their kids were no longer in the schools. They weren't as invested in the school system, and many were retiring, and some were leaving town. And in that process, as they were replaced, she felt that the people who were replacing them weren't as invested in the communication, and that was having an impact on the way the school budget and the town school committee and the town interacted with one another, which I thought was interesting, suggesting it may not be just the structure that makes a difference, but that you need people who are collaborative to be participating. So there were a number of questions after this meeting or during the Q&A following the meeting, many of which suggested that the finance committees have difficulty in many different towns negotiating with the school boards. So this is obviously something that it is an issue for many municipalities, and at least several of them were interested in trying this different structure. I don't think the people from Mansfield thought that just creating such a committee was going to be enough to fix the problem. So that was an interesting discussion. I thought it was had significant kind of implications for our own situation that were interesting to kind of consider. So that was the second session, and that Marty and I attended. There was a session on legal issues, and both of which we were both interested in, but were unable to attend. And there was another session that we didn't get to. But overall, I'd say the experience was great. It was interesting. It was interesting to interact with people from other towns, get a sense of how much shared kind of many towns share the same dynamic and struggle with some of the same issues. And it also was interesting to get a sense of how many towns particularly this year, are struggling with their school budgets, with kind of experiencing the impact of the last several years of high inflation, with Prop 2.5 limits on what the growth of the town budget. This is putting a strain on a number of different communities, and there's a lot of anxiety over what the state was going to do about state aid. So definitely worth considering next year. There is if you go to the website, the Mass Municipal Association, the MMA, has a website with a number of different educational programs, and the Association of Town Finance Committees has some educational materials on that website that is worth looking at. And they are planning a couple of smaller meetings this spring that we should just pay attention to, that would be a couple of hours, but targeting specific topics. Okay, so that's that. That leads relatively nicely into the regional school committee letter that we've been speaking about with Sherburne Finance. A couple of updates on that are worth mentioning. One is that I did have a conversation with Dan Shell from Sherburne this week, and they are he's getting a lot of pressure from his committee to go ahead and send their letter. I think I have distributed the most recent draft that he sent around. So they are intending to send that sometime in the next week or so. And I said that I did not, that the Warrant Committee would not be able to sign that, co-sign that, and that they should, if they feel compelled to get it in, that they should go ahead and send it without us voting. Mish, Nina, Marty, and I have all been working on a letter that might go from our committee to the schools. I wouldn't say we have a final draft that everybody's happy with, and I would also say that I think we all have some let's say misgivings or concerns about sending a letter at all right now. I did have a conversation with Robin this afternoon. Robin and Dave are having a Board of Selectmen meeting that's conflicting with this, and neither of them is able to attend the Warrant Committee. But Robin herself has spoken with Dawn, and I think there's a sense from Dawn and the school board that the Sherburne letter is unnecessarily harsh and more critical than it should be. And Dawn in particular feels as though process that they followed was appropriate, and that the communication was better than the letter is suggesting. We're not, a lot of that communication was directly between Dawn and Sherburne, and therefore it's hard to comment on exactly what the communication was, and not sure it's useful for us to get involved in that. I do think that it's worth us thinking about what our goal is in all this. And I would say as we think about whether or not we want to write a letter, we should kind of define for ourselves what we're trying to achieve, and then in light of that, decide whether or not a letter would help us achieve those. So, happy to entertain comments about the process, the letter, questions, concerns, thoughts about what the next steps should be.
I'm curious, you'd mentioned you had several of our committee members cohesively working on a draft, and that's great to hear. I'm just curious, just for our edification, what roadblocks you've run into, and maybe what areas maybe could use some additional support, that there's still question marks, and just given what you've mentioned, the conflict of potentially putting forth the letter and the effort behind it, and maybe.
Yeah. Mish, you wanted to comment?
So spurred by the last meeting where, people thought maybe the tone needed to be completely different. Nina and I worked together instead of trying to revise the letter that already existed, to try and take the tone that people had put forward and try and draft a new, simpler letter, not go over the events of last May, sort of chapter and verse, that sort of case building style, but instead just simply look at what we're asking for, which Woody, you had given us direction that you're looking for a meeting, a regular meeting during the budget process, and then a review of capital expenses, and then capital expenses worked into how the town considers capital expenses as a whole. So those two things were sort of the goals that we decided to focus on, and sort of ask for those, instead of framing the letter as, here's something that went wrong 5 months ago, 6 months ago, just saying, as we start a new process of budgeting, we'd like to start forward on a new foot, and ask for these meetings. And in the process of doing that, going through sort of revisions, it seemed to beg the question, do we even need this letter? Why aren't we just asking them for a meeting and for the meetings? And I think that's where things were, last I saw last we went through the emails. Does that sound right, Nina?
Perfect. Yeah, I don't think, I think, again, just putting the words in there, in the spirit of transparency and collaboration, that's really what we're trying to achieve. So everything you said is, exactly right with that spirit in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So it was sort of, we're saying, in the spirit of collaboration, and we're all trying to get the same result here. We're all trying to, support the schools. How can we do that best by creating these meetings? And I think Marty had some thoughts that, that maybe just asking for a meeting, I'm not sure it was Marty or Woody, but anyway, just asking for a meeting might be enough to put these on the table in person, and have Dawn help brainstorm some of the ways that this process could be better.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I think there's been a lot of fingers in the pot stirring here. And I'm not sure who has said what to whom, when, and as stories get told, things sometimes end up in a place that different than where you started. And I think there's been some observation made that you have a very strong business manager in the regional school district who does a really great job. And I think I don't think anybody would dispute that. And if there's going to be a characterization that you didn't follow some regulation or some issue, there may be some reason for that, and there should be some opportunity for that person to talk about that. And I think on the side of both towns, this is all about making sure we have a good process of communication and transparency, as you said. I think the other issue was making sure that when it comes to capital budget items, you take advantage of the talent and expertise to make sure that we're maximizing the value of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it's, I think, ultimately a process of trying to get everybody on the same page that there needs to be a regular and fulsome communication, and both ways, really, from us to them and from them to us. And I think that can be dealt with in a much better way, person to person, particularly if there's that one key individual at the school committee, because I think if that's the way that that group works, if there's going to be any acknowledgement of an error, it's going to fall on that person to be the one that made the error. And I don't think we're trying to say you made an error. It's just we want to clarify and make sure we get on a good mode. Because if you try to tie this back to what Woody just described in terms of that session and the dysfunction that takes place in other towns between school boards and the finance committees, we don't want to get to that point. I don't think we want to have to get to the point of Mansfield creating a whole nother layer and set of meetings just because there hasn't been an effective communication channel established and maintained. And that, I think, is the bottom line of what we're trying to do. So that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but I think that's what we've been trying to get to in terms of what's the most effective way to achieve that objective. Is it to drop two separate letters onto them and sort of formalize the relationship, or do we want to try to maintain and improve upon what I think's been going on in the past?
Yeah, if I may comment, I pretty much agree with the entire conversation here. It creates a different situation when we had Sherborne wanting us to join them in a single letter. In those circumstances, I thought that we should make it much milder. But I mean, I think we can build a much more stronger relationship with the school board by just talking with them directly and working with them directly. And I think we do need at some point to say we weren't particularly happy with the fact that there was a fairly major change in the way they were allocating the budget that they'd asked for, and that we would just plead that they inform us of that and give us some indication why that happened, and just leave it at that, and then just try and build that relationship. And not even necessarily in a special meeting, but we're going to have to start meeting with them soon anyway on budgets, just maybe putting that in the context of the first meeting we have to review their budget proposals might be a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think to your suggestion, Cam, once you do have that conversation, you come to a meeting of the minds, memorialize it in some way, just a letter back to Dawn, whoever it is, just saying to confirm our prior conversation, just to make sure we're all on the same page, whatever went on and whatever was agreed. That way, we both feel like we were part of the correction of path, or whatever we want to call this, in terms of how we're going to operate going forward.
So one of the things that I certainly wasn't completely aware of, and that I think makes our situation particularly difficult, is the fact that we have a regional school district with two different towns, with two different financial situations and different kind of financial structures, interacting with a school committee that thinks of itself as regional, representing the kids from both towns equally. The other thing that I didn't appreciate until recently is that the Sherburne Advisory Committee and the school board have a history of fairly tense relations that goes back many years. I think the style of the Sherburne Advisory Committee is somewhat different than that of the Warrant Committee in general, and the relationship between the schools and Sherburne Advisory is more complicated for a variety of reasons. One of which is that Sherburne and Dover both have essentially the same number of kids in the regional schools right now. So their financial assessments are very close to the same. Sherburne's tax base, though, is significantly smaller than Dover's, and the schools constitute a larger percentage of the Sherburne budget than is true in Dover. I think, Kim, you might know this better than I, but I think the schools were about 52% of our budget last year, or 51% of our budget last year. I think it was around 58% of the Sherburne budget. And Sherburne has, at least for several years, been concerned about needing to Prop 2.5 override, which they've been looking to avoid. There are people in Dover who feel that the Sherburne has exaggerated their financial problems, and that they've been more difficult to deal with for the schools than should be true. And I don't think we have any interest in getting involved in those tensions. But it is true that we're going to have to kind of communicate with the school board and with Sherburne around the budget. There's a municipal agreement that's the towns have signed. We come up with assessments based on the school committee comes up with assessments based on the size of the student body. We are going to have to figure out a way to communicate better, and it feels as though one thing that might hopefully come out of this is that we might be able to facilitate somewhat better communication between the Sherburne Advisory and the Regional School Board, not just between us and the school board. One of the things that I thought was interesting about the Mansfield presentation at the meeting last Saturday was that part of what the goal of that committee was the committee, or the structure they established was to get the school board to think of themselves as part of the town. And I think there is a tendency for school boards in many towns to isolate themselves. They have a lot of autonomy in the way they spend their budgets. And a lot of that autonomy is by statute. That they don't tend to think of their budget as being part of the total budget. They think of it as somewhat separate. And in many ways it is. I think the town administration in Dover and the Warrant Committee have historically tried to give the schools the resources that they ask for. But this year, for example, when Barry presents, we'll see this, but the 5-year capital plan has a big bolus coming through this year. There are a number of requests in the 5-year plan for capital expenses. And the schools are coming in with a request for a new turf field at the high school, which is going to cost, I think, either $1.2 or $1.5 million. So getting the schools to think about their capital requests in the context of what the rest of the capital needs are of the town, for example, is it possible the school could put this off for a year when the capital request may be a little less? I think those are the kinds of things that would be desirable in a situation in which the in which the school committee and the town finance committees communicated better. So,
Can I ask you a question, Woody?
Yeah.
So some of these big expenses and the reallocation of money, when would those issues have been raised? Would that been during regional school committee meetings, or was there an opportunity for us to have heard it before?
You mean about the turf field?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, the last year, what all those things that were mentioned in the letter where Sherburne was not aware of.
Well, Dawn says that she actually had a conversation with people from Sherburne about those issues. I don't know that anyone from our committee had a conversation with her about the way they were dealing with their capital expenses. We did know their need to replace air handlers on the high school was in the capital pipeline, if you will. But I think what happened is that there were a lot of details that never got communicated to our capital budget committee, and there was an issue about electrification, for example, which our capital budget committee has been pushing for a while. That the initial proposal from the schools was not to have an electric system. So there were a bunch of ways in which the process didn't go smoothly.
I think that the real issue was, though, that a budget was approved, and then a decision was taken by the school committee, I presume, to spend the money in a different manner. And I think it would have been appropriate for the school board to reach out to us and say, hey, there has been this substantial change, because we're probably going to be faced with spending a new amount of money to do the original work in another 5 years or whatever it happens to be. And so I think it would have been really appropriate to hear from the school committee that was happening. Now, that may have just been a failure of our liaising with the school committee, so I don't want to point fingers at the school committee, but I think we need to try and build a more collaborative relationship where we can actually just make sure that the other party knows what's going on, because it'll help future relations as well.
Right. I mean, I was kind of surprised when I read that letter, also because Dawn's always been extremely available and open. Whenever, always said, if you guys have a question, we're happy to sit down with you. And some of those issues that were mentioned in the letter, I feel like I've heard those things in the past. So I'm just trying to figure out where those could have been communicated, and can we somehow, did we miss it somewhere, and can we make it a little bit better going forward? But I don't think there was any bad intention from the school committee to have this as some sort of secret way to handle.
I think you're absolutely right, Janet. I agree with you entirely on that. I just think we saw a bit of a weakness in the process that we have, and it might make sense to discuss that with the representatives from the school committee when we get a chance. But it also means we should be spending more work on making sure that we do understand exactly what is happening. If there was a school committee meeting that we weren't attending through our liaisons, then it's our own damn fault.
Well, even if you didn't attend it, Cam, would that be the kind of item that the regional school committee reports in their minutes and would be available to see? Do we know?
I presume so, yes. Again, I think that we just need to make sure that we're communicating better.
I mean,
and we don't need to point fingers in the process.
Right. I mean, it's also, instead of sending a letter, I would much rather have a meeting with the school committee and Dawn, just to talk about what might have fallen through and what we could do to change in the future. I mean, sending a letter just feels, I mean, we're both in the town, we work together. It just feels a little uncomfortable, especially because they do really good job every year.
So are you making a motion to not send a letter, Janet?
I'd rather just have a meeting with Dawn and school committee, head of school committee, than sending a letter.
Yeah, I think we've got a consensus on that. So I think maybe we just
Yeah, I'm not
put
sure we
that.
need a motion. I think I'm fine just deciding that the consensus is that we're going to hold off on the letter. If the school committee is reluctant to meet, or if there's some problem with the communication, we can always send a letter at some point in the future.
Right.
But
Yeah, and I don't think we even need to take it to the whole school committee. We can just deal with it in our budget process, and not make a big sort of standalone issue out of it, but say, hey, we felt that there was poor communications there, and we're not pointing fingers, but we think we need to improve that, and how can we do that?
yeah, I do think it would be desirable if the schools embrace the capital budget process in a way that they currently don't. And I don't know that that's I don't know that that's deliberately withdrawing as much as it's just not necessarily being aware of what's available to them. So it feels as though if we start to communicate better, that we can talk through the capital budget as well as some of these other issues. I also do think, though, that one point of meeting with them is to make them more aware of the town's situation.
Mhm.
Yep.
We're gonna be tight this year, most likely, with a large capital bolus and a number of requests for additional personnel last year that we deferred because of the size of the growth in the budget last year. So,
Right. But Woody, we presumably have already told them that in our guidance letter, right?
we have, but I don't have the sense that the schools necessarily are paying that much attention to it. And I think it's how you operationalize it, not just what the guidance letter says.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree.
Do we-
And I also think it's fair to point out to the school, or to have the schools understand that our situation and Sherburne's situation may be different, and they have to deal with that difference. That there's no somehow we have to be able to come together around a budget that everybody's comfortable with. I also would say that one goal for having these meetings is to see if we can, this may be overly optimistic, but to see if we can reduce some of the tension between the Sherburne Advisory and the school board, which sounds like it's been ongoing for a long time. When I spoke to Dan this week, he said he got a lot, when he moderated his letter, he got a lot of grief from the rest of his committee wanting it to be harsher. So I do think that there's, and I would say that in my conversations with Robin, that there's definitely a sense of kind of strong resentment from the school board towards the Sherburne Advisory that goes back many years. So it feels as though we'd all be more productive if we could reduce some of that tension.
Do we,
one way
sorry,
to do that is communicate better.
do we
Sorry.
need to consider then who are the liaisons to this regional school committee, especially because of all of this, that may, or add a third person or something, like, do we have I don't know, because I haven't done this before, but I don't know if it needs to be someone who's who can be sensitive to, especially maybe has a history with Dawn and working with her. I don't know.
Yep. Well, Marty, you're primary, aren't you, on the regional schools?
I am for this year, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Kevin is secondary, is that right?
Yeah.
So I would, I think we should keep close track on things, and it may be that a third person would be worthwhile. There is, it's such a big part of the budget. It's hard to stay on top of it.
Yeah, and if there's an expectation that somebody should be at every meeting that they have, I don't know how often they meet, we may need a third person, I don't know.
Yep.
Can I just ask a question? When you just mentioned schools and the connection to the capital budget process and trying to be more holistic in terms of whatever they're doing to incorporate in the broader process. Is that an issue with the Dover schools as well, or are you just referring to the regional school?
No, it's an issue with the Dover schools, although I don't think they have the same capital requests coming in this year that the regional school does.
Okay,
The regional schools have this turf field, which is a big expense. It's like $1.5 million.
okay.
I think
Thanks.
there's some small capital requests from the Dover schools, but nothing of that size this year. That's my understanding. Don't put too much into that. But that is an issue.
I wanted to add something if I could pop in here. I've served with regional and have attended Sherborne Advisory through my liaison for the last 4 years. It turned out to be 4, even though we typically rotate after 3. But given that my first appointment with Warrant started out in the pandemic, I thought it would be sort of an organic segue that given that first year I served, it was all Zoom, that it would just make sense for me to attend in person. That said, they don't welcome questions. It doesn't matter if you're a liaison, the public is not allowed to comment. I was spoken to in a way that was not at all collegial or friendly, and I was there to introduce myself and just mention that I'm here to support throughout the year, and because I'm new to this role, I wanted to come in person. I think that the letter that we're thinking about sending and or the meeting is important, and a couple of reasons why. That relationship is not one that, at least for purposes of my experience, and I'm not sure how they intersect with other governing bodies, but because town warrant committees and school committees operate separate, independent of each other, and each committee is obviously focused on their specific responsibilities. For me, I didn't care for that feeling of we have our own sort of plan here, and we're not really required, or we're immune from anyone else's input. And that was the message that I got, given the tone and the delivery of what I received in person. I've gone on, obviously, to continue my responsibilities with it, which is why when I emailed you, I asked very specifically to maybe rotate elsewhere. But I would be happy to continue, given that Don Fattori is remarkable and so thorough and so capable, and has always afforded us every detail given her vast resource and experience. So she makes the liaison position very easy. But that said, the part about us offering them either input through a letter or a meeting, I do think that it's important that we don't just say, well, we're going to be quieter about this, in that we too are charged with bringing matters. Well, when matters are brought to the attention of our committee, our role is to review and to make recommendations on items that will then appear on town warrant. And if that information is relevant, it really should be considered before decisions are made at the meetings, for instance, that they did vote on. I think coordination between the two is essential, especially when issues are overlapping, and especially regarding budgeting and funding. So that is my long 2 cents. Thank you.
But I've actually heard, listening to school committee meetings, I've heard similar comments about their autonomy and the fact that they don't need to report to anyone about how they manage their budget. That is, there is, as I said, statutory basis for them having control over how they expend their funds. Ultimately, though, the money that they have to spend is voted through the warrant. So in order for them to get the money, there has to be communication with the warrant committee and the rest of the town administration. So I think it's in their interests, both in Dover and Sherburne, to have cordial relationships with the financial boards and the town administrations. And I think we can facilitate that by interacting with them more.
If I may add another comment, Woody, I think that the schools committee is not unique in that sense of having an independent statutory relationship to the town. The warrant committee itself has such an independent position, and they can't be told what to do by the Board of Selectmen, for example. But we reach out to the Board of Selectmen and encourage an active liaison with them, so we know what's going on, and we can get a clear sense of what their needs and aspirations are in terms of financial budgets. And I would hope that we could get to the same point with the schools. And I agree with Sarah's comment. When I was a neophyte on the warrant committee, the first year I was on it.
That was a long time ago, Cam.
Yeah, I haven't got any hair now.
That was before Wi-Fi, Cam.
But I really felt I got the cold shoulder and I wasn't really welcome. And you know, it's just even on personal terms, I felt that I was being edged out, and so I'm not at all surprised that Sarah had the same feeling.
Yeah, the other committee that has some independence in its financial dealings, though, for example, is Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And last year, there was a lot of negotiation with Parks and Rec around capital expense. They wanted to do a plan for renovation of Carroll Park, of the parking lot, of the tennis courts, of the playground. And through negotiations with the capital budget committee, it was decided to only do the planning for the playground, since that was the most urgent, with the idea of putting off some of the other projects, the planning, not denying them, but putting them off when there's a time when there's a little less pressure on the capital budget. That was the genesis of the pickleball revolt at town meeting.
Yeah, but that mostly was done by the capital budget committee. We
Yes.
didn't have
No,
much to do with
I
that.
agree with that, but what I'm saying is that they were willing to accommodate the change through negotiation. They weren't happy, but they were willing to accommodate. And the same should be true of other quasi-independent, if you will, town departments like the school committee. That if it's better for the town as a whole to defer some capital expense because we have a big bolus coming through, and their project won't suffer if it's deferred, it would be reasonable for us to ask them that to happen. And I think it's making them more aware of that, of those pressures on the towns, and getting them to accept the fact that those are legitimate things that they should be thinking about is part of the goal, it seems to me.
Well, even without that level of detail, Woody, if it is 50, would you say 52% of the Dover budget?
Yes.
That's a pretty significant chunk of dollars that end up at the regional school, that they should be looking at their two biggest customers, Dover and Sherborne, as the supporters of the system, that they should be aligned with the need to have transparency and communication in a manner that allows us to make a informed decision. That's all we're looking for. And I wonder if there's an opportunity in this training session you mentioned that's going to take place in early December to maybe raise that as a question with Dawn in terms of how can we work on that, so that we don't have comments like Sarah and Cam going forward. And for me, just getting into it now, in my own personal interest, I want it to go well, and I prefer not to have to deal with maybe some restrictions or blockages in getting it done.
I just have a question. Does the 52% include Chickering, and does Dawn also work in Chickering's budget, or is that separate altogether?
John does work with Chickering's budget, and it does include Chickering.
Okay.
And,
So
and
the schools are 52% of the town
yeah.
budget.
Okay.
And the school,
But I also have to say, and somewhat in contradiction to what I just said, and I think Sarah was of the same opinion, Dawn has always been collaborative when asked. For example, that whole thing with the air handlers, I was on the capital budget when that was being discussed, and Dawn came back and said, "Okay, we'll make them electric." So I think there is certainly an experience of collaboration, but the school committee itself tends to not really want to have to deal with us. And that might also reflect the financial, they defer most financial issues to Dawn anyway. And I don't get the sense that the school committee delves very deeply into the budget process. They just hope that the money gets there.
Yep.
right? I don't think we need to justify that and or to question that we're not looking to question that they have the authority to make decisions about school operations, nor their ability to propose a budget that reflects the need of the district. However, because they're accountable to the town and its residents and their budgetary decisions that impact the overall town budget, I think we very much have a place at the table to bring that up.
Yeah, agreed. So my sense is that it's appropriate for me to reach out to Mark, Healy, and Dawn, so that maybe Marty and I and representatives from Sherburne Advisory could meet with the two of them, at least to start some discussion about kind of improving communication.
That sounds good.
All right, great. So last thing I had was just briefly reviewing the schedule for the warrant committee. As I said, we've got we'll meet next week and the following week, but not Thanksgiving week, and then pick up again after Thanksgiving, hopefully with some educational kind of slash discussion topics with each of the session. Then the big dates are going to be the middle of January. We're expecting Michael Blanchard and Robin and Carl Valenti to present the budget. Hopefully early January, but I'm saying mid-January. Michael thinks that he can have it by the first week in January. So that would be a budget overview, acknowledging that there will be some placeholders. Some things won't be completely established. February 12th is the date, at least that's on the books, for the meeting of the Warrant Committee with Sherburne Advisory and the Regional School Committee. That's usually held at the middle school in the library, and is a chance for them to present their budget. Dawn did say, however, that she is anticipating having a budget at the beginning of January. So hopefully we'll get things from them earlier than in the past. Then our two longer review sessions are going to be February 26th and March 5th. Those are both Wednesdays. The 2 Wednesdays after school vacation week. We'll probably start those meetings at 6 and end at least by 10, hopefully significantly before 10.
Sorry, say the dates on that again, please.
February 26th and March 5th.
Are those virtual or are they in-person meetings?
I think at least at this point, they'll probably be virtual. I would be willing to have them in person if there's kind of strong sense for it.
Woody, were you going to circulate that list of all those dates you just went over so people can
It
have it?
actually was attached to the guidance letter, but I'll send it out as a separate
Okay,
thing.
thank you.
Sorry, one more time, the dates in March, please.
February 26th and March 5th would be the review sessions. So we're going to do all the reviews of the departments and the committee budgets in 2 longer sessions, with a spillover date March 12th, at which we will complete the budget, any remaining budget issues, and also review non-budgetary articles being proposed by both town committees and or departments and any citizens petitions. And then currently open hearing is proposed for March 17th. That's Monday. That's a Monday. The others are all Wednesdays. And the March and the open hearing is in person. And then, town meeting is May 5th. All right, great. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So
That's it.
moved.
Other new
Sorry.
business.
You beat me.
Okay, I got a
Second, good
second.
night.
I'll take it by acclamation. If you
I
just
have to
raise,
go make dinner for my kids. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
I'm doing a virtual acclamation.
okay, thank you, Cam. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.